Behind the oldest hut in the village of Danwanu, where the soil turns redder than blood and the wind carries whispers instead of songs, stood the mbala tree, wide as a hut, older than memory, and feared as much as it was revered. Its roots crawled across the earth like sleeping serpents, and its bark was thick, blackened, and carved with names, hundreds of them, each one belonging to a soul born of the Jangola bloodline. The tree did not grow leaves until a child was born. And when it did, a single leaf, dark green and heart-shaped, would unfold above a fresh carving in the bark, glistening as if the wood itself wept with joy. The carving was sacred. It was the child's mark in the world, deeper than any ceremony, louder than any drumbeat. To be carved into the mbala tree was to be claimed, not just by the living, but by the ancestors, the land, and the spirits who whispered through fire, smoke and river foam. No child truly existed until their name was etched into the tree's flesh. And no name was ever removed, not even in death. Until it happened. The elders tell it in hushed voices, around fires that crackle nervously when the tale begins. They say long ago, a man took hot iron and burned out a name, not scratched, not crossed, but seared from the bark until only black ash remained. And that night, the tree bled. The next day, birds did not sing. Milk turned sour in pots. Goats refused to graze near the roots. Children cried without knowing why. And at dusk, just as the last shadow of the sun kissed the ground, someone heard it, a girl's voice, crying from beneath the soil, her sobs shaking the roots like thunder too soft for the sky. No one speaks the girl's name now. Some say remembering it invites her back. Others say forgetting her is why she remains. But all agree on one thing, the mbala tree remembers. And when it is wronged, it waits. It doesn't seek vengeance with flame or storm. It watches. It listens. And when the time comes, it carves the truth back into itself, not with tools, but with blood. So they say, be born, be claimed, be remembered. But never be erased. Nyama was born on a night when the moon hid behind a veil of thick clouds, as if ashamed to witness her arrival. The rain had fallen hard that evening, soaking the red earth until it clung to the feet of the midwives like blood. Her first cry was sharp, fierce, almost too loud for a newborn, as though she had not just entered the world, but returned to it with memories still burning on her tongue. She was the daughter of Chief Jangola's first union, a quiet, soft-eyed woman named Mbara, who came from a fishing clan far downriver. Mbara was not beloved by the elders, nor trusted by the shrine keepers, for she spoke to herbs and listened to stones. But when Nyama was born, even the village seer paused and whispered, she came with her name. Her carving was etched into the mbala tree before her umbilical cord had dried. The bark accepted it easily. The leaf grew before sunrise. For 16 years, Nyama grew beneath the heavy eyes of a father who watched her like something he couldn't quite kill. Jangola had long since taken another wife, the daughter of a rival chief, bold in voice and ruthless in pride. From this union came 2 sons, and with them, a hunger in Jangola's heart, for legacy, for image, for clean bloodlines untainted by what he now called Mbara's curse. Nyama bore the rejection in silence. Her mother had died 3 reigns after her birth, her body found twisted beneath the irako tree, eyes wide, hands clutched as if grasping something invisible. They said it was a spirit's doing. Others said it was grief. Nyama never knew. What she did know was that she walked alone. The servants were forbidden from serving her food. Her stepmother spat in the fire whenever she entered a room. And her brothers called her tree ghost behind her back, mocking the name carved so deeply into sacred bark. Then came the gathering day, a festival where each family made offerings beneath the mbala tree, where names were honored with songs, and ancestors were thanked with ground cola and bitter wine. On that day, Jangola called for a new ritual, one the village had never seen before. Drummers played, but their rhythms were unsure. The villagers gathered, faces puzzled and silent. Jangola stood before the tree in full ceremonial robes. His sons flanked him, proud and tall. Beside him, the village blacksmith held a rod of iron glowing hot, its heat shimmering the air. "My people," Jangola declared, "there is rot among our roots. A curse placed in the name of false blood. Today, we purify the tree. Naima, tied at the wrists, was dragged to the front. She did not scream. She only looked up, not at her father, but at the tree. Her name was there, halfway up the trunk, bold and clear. And then the iron touched it. A hiss louder than fire filled the air. The bark cracked. The leaf above her name curled into ash and dropped like a tear. The smoke that rose smelled of bone. Somewhere in the crowd, a child began to cry. And then another. But no one moved. Not even when Naima collapsed. The ritual continued in silence. Jangala raised the iron, now blackened with soot, and declared, "She is no longer of our blood. Her name is no longer ours. She is unclaimed." That night, under the light of a half-broken moon, they led her to the edge of the river. She wore only the red shift of an outcast. The guards said nothing. The villagers looked away. Beyond the river lay the forested hills, thick with vines and myths, where people who wandered were never seen again. Spirits lived there. Exiles too. Some said the forest could taste sorrow. Others said it kept secrets, but never kindly. Naima crossed without a word. The water reached her knees, then her waist. It was cold, but she did not shiver. She stepped beyond the village's last drumbeat and did not look back. The trees swallowed her. Behind her, the mbala tree stood blackened where her name once lived. The bark around it had cracked and darkened. By morning, 3 branches had turned brittle. Leaves began falling one by one, not from age, but from something unseen gnawing at its heart. The elders gathered, uneasy. The priest stared at the wound on the tree's side, his hands trembling. This has never been done," he whispered. "The tree accepts all names. It does not forget. Even in death, it keeps. This." He did not finish. But the whispers had begun. She was erased, the women murmured, hiding their children's eyes. "The tree bled," said an old hunter who had seen the iron smoke rise. "Her name will return," said the madwoman who sat near the well, rocking and smiling, but not with hands. With blood. And though no one would admit it aloud, each night that followed, they listened more carefully to the wind in the branches. Because sometimes, only sometimes, they thought they heard a girl crying beneath the roots. Not calling for help. Calling for memory. The land beyond the river was silent in a way that made the bones remember things the mind could not. No drums, no laughter, not even the chirp of birds dared disturb the stillness. Vines hung low like watchful serpents, and the trees stood tall and motionless, as though waiting for a name they had not heard in years. Naima wandered through the thick brush with the solemn grace of someone who no longer belonged to the world she had left. Each step took her deeper into the forest of the forgotten, and with each breath, the taste of exile grew thicker on her tongue. Days passed without food. Nights passed without sleep. But hunger was not the sharpest pain Naima carried, it was the absence. The absence of her name. The name she had known since she first opened her eyes to firelight and milk, the name her mother had sung into her ears while brushing her hair with fingers scented of river mint and clay. Now, no one would speak it. No one would write it. It had been burned, and so had she. She slept beneath broken canopies, using moss as her blanket, listening to the forest's breath. And at times, just as her eyes would close, she would hear them, whispers in a language she did not know, children crying in the distance, laughter that ended too quickly. In dreams, she saw faces, small ones, pale with time, blank where names should be. They floated around her like mist, hovering behind her eyelids, never touching, never leaving. One evening, her thirst dragged her from her resting place. Her lips cracked, her throat raw, she stumbled through the underbrush until she found it, the river whale. Its waters glistened like silver snakes, moving without sound, unnaturally still yet flowing. She had heard of it as a child. It was forbidden. The river was said to run not with water, but with memory. Those who drank from it were never the same. Some returned mad. Some never returned at all. But she was already gone. Naima knelt and dipped her hand into the current. It was warm. Too warm. As if the river had been expecting her. Her reflection in the surface did not mimic her, instead, it tilted its head the opposite way, blinked slowly, and smiled. She did not hesitate. She drank. The moment the water touched her tongue, the world stilled. The forest held its breath. Then the visions came. She saw a girl with missing fingers, clutching a bone doll. A boy with hollow eyes, standing in a field of ash. A mother kneeling beside a grave with no name. They looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. "We remember you," they said in one voice. Naima screamed. But the sound did not leave her mouth. It fell back into her chest and burst open like a drumbeat. Her body trembled. She fell backward into the earth, her hands clutching the soil, her fingers digging deep into the roots beneath her. When she awoke, it was night, but the darkness pulsed with red light. She raised her hands, and her palms were bleeding, not from wounds, but from within, like ink escaping from a cracked pot. The blood did not drip. It formed patterns. Circles. Spirals. Marks she did not recognize, yet somehow understood. She crawled toward a flat stone nearby and pressed her hands against it. The blood transferred, soaking into the stone like oil into cloth. And then it dried instantly. The symbols remained, glowing faintly, humming a sound so low it vibrated through her teeth. She didn't know what they meant. But she knew they were real. And she knew they were hers. In the days that followed, Naima changed. Animals no longer fled at her approach. A black bird, one-eyed and sharp-beaked, began following her, circling above her head, then landing nearby to watch as she traced new symbols in the dirt with her bleeding palms. The forest did not reject her. It bent around her. Thorns turned aside where she walked. The ground softened beneath her feet. Even the rain fell gently now, like it, too, had been waiting. She made a small hut from woven branches and bark. Not to hide, but to listen. At night, the whispers returned. But now, she listened back. "Where's your name?" one asked. "They burned it," she answered aloud. Silence. Then, "We kept it." Each night, her dreams grew clearer. The children of the nameless sat with her beside ghostly fires. They told stories with no beginnings, only endings. They whispered names she had never heard, and some she remembered from village graves long forgotten. She began carving their symbols on stones, on trees, even on her own skin. Her arms became a map of red calligraphy, not wounds, but language. A language of belonging. And slowly, she stopped feeling alone. The river whale she now visited every morning. It welcomed her, shimmered when she stepped near. When she drank now, the visions did not frighten her. They guided her. Showed her the past, her mother's voice, her own birth beneath the mbala tree, the moment the iron burned her name and the tree screamed in silence. She saw her father's face, cold and proud, and beneath it, a flicker of fear he had never shown. She saw the tree, rotting at the edges, black veins creeping upward. She saw her name, rising again from the bark in lines of blood. And she knew then, the mbala tree had not forgotten. The exile they forced on her had not erased her. It had awakened her. Naima stood before the river whale one morning, her arms glowing with fresh symbols. The air was thick, charged, as if the wind was waiting. "They burned my name," she whispered. The river stirred. "But names," she said, pressing her palm to the stone beside her, "can bleed back." And from the stone came a single word, her true name, spoken not aloud, but through root and water and sky. Naima. Remembered. In the weeks after Naima's exile, Chief Jangola's household grew louder, not with mourning, but with celebration. His new wife, Adissa, bore him a son, and the village drums echoed long into the night. The baby's cries were greeted with cheers. His arrival was seen as a sign that the chief's bloodline was now clean, untainted by the past. Women danced under moonlight, and the elders brought forth gourds of honeyed milk, blessing the boy with long life and power. They named him Bakery, Hope Reborn. Adissa glowed with triumph. She moved through the village like a queen already crowned, her eyes sweeping the people as though searching for those who had doubted her. Jangola stood beside her, his chest puffed with pride, the shame of his first daughter banished from all memory. No one dared speak Nyama's name. Her place had been cleansed. Or so they thought. A few days later, the chief summoned the village carver to the mbala tree. The same carver who had once etched Nyama's name into the bark now stood trembling before the blackened wound where her name had been burned away. The place still smelled faintly of ash. The tree's bark around the scar was cracked, darkened, and dry. Flies buzzed near the wound, though no sap had flowed since. "Carve," Jangola ordered. The carver hesitated. "But, the wound, chief. It has not healed." "It will," Jangola snapped. "The tree must carry Bakery's name. That place now belongs to him." And so, with trembling hands and eyes full of dread, the carver etched Bakery into the burned flesh of the mbala tree. At first, nothing happened. The bark accepted the letters. A single leaf grew above the carving, but its green was faint, too pale, almost yellow. The villagers noticed, but said nothing. That night, the birds did not return to roost in the tree. Owls, normally nesting in the highest branches, circled once and vanished. At dawn, a strange rust-colored liquid trickled from the carving, not sap. Something thicker. It stained the roots like spilled blood. By the third day, 3 more leaves had fallen from unrelated names. The tree's outer branches began curling. Children playing near the roots complained of headaches. One boy vomited and said he'd heard someone whispering from inside the bark. His mother slapped him for speaking such things. The elders gathered at the shrine. The village priest, Old Mua, was called to inspect the mbala tree. He stood there long, his fingers tracing the edges of Bakery's name, eyes narrowing as he studied the still wet stain below it. Then he stepped back, face grim. "This tree," he said, voice low, "knows every name it has ever held. It does not forget. It does not lie." Jangola folded his arms. "Then it must accept my son." Mua's gaze was cold. "You've made the tree speak a falsehood. The wound was not healed. That space was not empty. You tried to fill a grave with breath. The tree cannot hold a stolen place." "But I burned the name," Jangola insisted. "She is no longer of us." "You can remove the carving," Mua said softly. "But not the name. And not the truth." The chief turned away. He dismissed the priest with a wave of his hand. But in his heart, something stirred, a memory he could not smother. Nyama's face the moment her name was erased, the way she looked not at him, but at the tree. As if she were telling it something. That night, Adissa entered his hut with a troubled face. "Bakery hasn't stopped crying," she whispered. "And look," she held out the baby's cloth, stained with tiny smears of blood. From his palms. The chief snatched the child and looked closely. 2 thin cuts, too clean for nails, marked each tiny hand. Symbols, maybe. He couldn't be sure. He said nothing. But he didn't sleep. In the weeks that followed, Bakery grew, strong and curious. But something hovered around him like a shadow. When he passed the mbala tree, he turned away. When his mother tried to place his hand against the bark, he shrieked and slapped her. The tree's wound, meanwhile, deepened. Moss refused to grow near it. Roots cracked the ground beneath as if something underneath was struggling to surface. The villagers stopped gathering near the tree. Some said a wrong had been buried in its flesh. Some whispered the old name had returned. And Bakery, though still a boy, began to ask questions, about a girl he saw in dreams, a girl who stood under the tree with arms painted in red, eyes glowing like fireflies. "She looks like me," he told his mother once. Adissa paled. "Don't speak of dreams." But the dream returned. And so did the bleeding from his palms. And the tree continued to rot. The sickness began with the carver. He was found lying near the base of the mbala tree one morning, eyes open and lips whispering nonsense. His hands, once steady as stone, trembled like wind-touched leaves, and strange red sores marked his fingertips. He mumbled about whispers in the bark, a breath that kissed his ear, and the feeling that something had crawled up his arms and settled inside his chest. By dusk, he had stopped speaking altogether. By dawn, he was dead. Not long after, the chief's youngest servant, the boy who had helped polish the carving tools before Bakery's name was etched, collapsed while fetching water. His skin had turned gray, and his heartbeat fluttered like bird wings in a trap. He survived, barely, but he no longer spoke above a whisper. He now stared at the mbala tree like it was something watching him back. Whispers spread like dry leaves in wind. The tree is cursed. No, the name is cursed. No, the lie is cursed. Villagers began dreaming of Naima. At first, just a few, an old woman, a weaver, one of the guards who had escorted her to exile. Then more. They dreamed of her walking beneath the mbala tree, her body robed in shadows, her arms glowing with strange red markings, her feet bare, yet leaving no sound as she moved. In some dreams, she said nothing. In others, she sang an old lullaby her mother once sang, one no one had heard in 16 years. One boy claimed he woke in the middle of the night and saw Naima standing by the tree, real, not dreamed. But when he blinked, she was gone. Only a pile of red dust remained where her feet had stood. Then came the carving. It appeared beneath Bakery's name without any hand touching the tree. No one saw it happen. One day, it simply was. Fresh and deep, as though etched only moments before. But instead of brown bark or sap, the carving wept a thick, red substance, unmistakably blood. The name read, Nyama. Not a ghost of it. Not a shadow. But full, deliberate letters, clean, angry, alive. The village froze. Even the wind seemed to halt its breath. People stood before the tree and stared, not daring to go closer. The priest was called again. He arrived slowly, as if dreading what he would find. When he saw the name, he did not gasp or cry out. He only lowered his head and began to hum an ancient mourning song, not for Naima, but for the village. Jangola arrived soon after, furious. Who dares defy my orders? Who carved that name? No one answered. Erase it, he ordered. The carvers refused. Then burn the tree, he snarled. Let it die with its curse. A new woodcutter, young and strong, was chosen for the task. He stepped forward, shaking but determined, clutching a sharp axe blessed by the priest years ago. The villagers gathered, a circle of silence around him. The tree stood tall, unmoving, waiting. He raised the axe. The moment the blade touched bark, it rebounded violently. The force threw the young man backward into the air. He crashed onto the earth 10 paces away. When they reached him, his wrist was broken. His eyes were wide, white showing all around, and he kept repeating, it turned, the axe turned. He never touched wood again. Still, Jangola persisted. Bring oil. Bring fire. This is witch work. The priest stepped forward, finally speaking. You cannot burn what does not burn. You cannot wound what remembers. This tree is awake. It has called her back. Jangola stepped close, voice low and bitter. You dare speak against me? You protect a traitor's child? I protect truth, the priest said. And the truth is, her name was never yours to erase. Jangola's eyes flared, but he said nothing. Around them, the villagers stood in tense silence, caught between fear of the tree and fear of their chief. That night, no one slept. Thunder rolled in the distance, though the sky was clear. Dogs whined and refused to leave their huts. Children clung to their mothers and whispered of girls with red eyes walking outside the windows. Bakery woke screaming. Blood had poured from his hands again, but this time it had formed a shape on the mat, a leaf. Not drawn. Formed. And within it, written in blood, was a word even he could read. Return. Adissa cried out and tried to wash it away, but the blood would not smear. It dried instantly, sinking into the weave of the mat like it had always been there. In the days that followed, the land began to change. Crops near the mbala tree withered. Cattle avoided its shade. The shrine keepers claimed the earth beneath the roots had cracked. One brave man who dared dig at the edge said he heard breathing, deep and slow, rising from the soil. People stopped coming near. The priest gathered the elders. "This is not punishment," he said. "It is correction. The tree is not angry. It is truthful. The girl's name was never gone. And now it cries out because she does not stand beneath it. It calls to be whole again." The elders argued, but none denied the signs. The priest turned to Jangola one last time. "There is still time." But Jangola spat into the fire. "She is gone. And if she returns, I will bury her myself." The priest stood, robe whispering over the floor. "Then it is not the girl who will be buried, chief." And he left. And from that night onward, the tree continued to bleed. And the blood spelled one name only. It began with thunder, though the sky above the village of Danwana remained cloudless. A single, jagged crack split the night, loud enough to silence every drum, loud enough to wake even the dying. No lightning followed. No wind stirred. The animals stopped moving, and the moon dimmed behind a thin film, as though retreating from what was about to come. And then she appeared. A girl, clothed in red robes that moved without wind, stepped into the village square. Her arrival was soundless, her feet bare and clean despite the dust. No one saw her come from the road. No guard had watched her enter. One moment the square was empty, the next, she stood beneath the mbala tree. The flames of the nearby torches flickered unnaturally, stretching sideways as she passed them. No one saw her face. The hood of her robe hung low, casting her features in shadow, but her presence struck the heart like memories suddenly remembered. Some say the shadows clung to her body like roots. Others claim they heard her robes whispering over the ground, not fabric, but voices. No one dared speak. From windows and doorways, the villagers watched, frozen. Not in fear, but in knowing. She approached the mbala tree slowly, deliberately, as if each step was a verdict. The earth beneath her feet did not crunch. It pulsed, gently, rhythmically, like a second heartbeat beneath the village. The tree seemed to lean toward her as she neared. The blackened wound beneath Bakery's name still oozed red. The air was thick, as if the tree had been holding its breath for years. She reached out a single hand. Her fingers, pale and stained with faint red markings, brushed the bark. The moment skin met wood, the entire tree shuddered. A low hum, barely audible, spread through the air like a deep drumbeat too low for ears. The wound stopped bleeding. Then the tree began to glow. Not brightly, not like flame, but from within. A soft red light pushed through its bark, like embers in a dying fire reigniting. It traveled up the trunk, down the roots, seeping into the soil. The earth beneath the tree turned black and glossy, as if ink had spilled into the roots and was spreading outward. No one moved. The girl in red lowered her hand. She stood silently for a few more moments, then turned, her face still hidden. Without a word, she walked away from the tree and disappeared into the darkness between two huts, swallowed by shadow, never lifting her hood, never speaking. The next morning, Bakery awoke with wide eyes and silence on his tongue. He opened his mouth to speak but no sound came out, not even breath. His voice was gone, as if plucked from his throat in the night. Adissa wept, clutching her son and begging the priest to restore him. But the priest merely looked toward the tree. "It has begun," he murmured. "The silence will spread, until the truth is spoken." That same morning, the elders of Danwana gathered to speak of omens, but as the sun rose higher, each one fell into silence. One by one, they slumped into their seats, eyes fluttering shut, mouths half open. But they were not sleeping. They were listening. In their trance, their mouths moved slowly, murmuring a tune none of them had heard in years, a lullaby. soft and sorrowful, the same one Bara, Nyama's mother, used to sing on nights when the moon was full. The same lullaby that once lulled a baby girl to sleep under the branches of the mbala tree. The song rose through the air like mist, winding around huts, slipping beneath doors, pressing itself into the ears of every man, woman, and child. And in that lullaby, there was a name. Nyama. Whispered once. Then again. Nyama. The village stood still. Children cried for no reason. Dogs buried their heads beneath their paws. The wind picked up for the first time in days, circling the tree like a spirit returned. That night, no one lit the fires. Even Jangola sat in his hut in silence, staring at his hands, remembering the smoke that rose when the iron burned his daughter's name. He remembered her eyes, not begging, not fearful. Only watching. Watching him. Watching the tree. The name had returned to the bark without hands. Now she had returned without drums. But the silence she brought spoke louder than any celebration. The earth no longer rejected her. It welcomed her. And with each breath she took on village soil, something shifted, not just in the people, but in the land itself. The crops nearest the mbala tree began to sprout again, but they twisted as they grew, not in sickness, but in difference. Their leaves bore faint patterns, like runes etched into green. The goats that had refused the tree's shade now stood near it without fear, but stared up at its branches with reverence. Birds began circling it once more, though none dared land. Only the crows perched now. The red-robed girl did not appear again for days, but the effects of her return lingered. Children began humming the lullaby in their sleep. Women dreamed of walking through misted forests with blood-stained hands. And always, always, they spoke the name they had forgotten. Nyama. The girl without a name. The daughter who was denied. The one who returned, not with fire or sword, but with memories so sharp it could bleed. And the mbala tree stood brighter now. Not healed, not yet. But alive. Alive in a way no one had seen in decades. It no longer bled. It remembered. At dawn, the mbala tree pulsed red like a slow, ancient heartbeat. The entire village of Danwanu had gathered beneath it, not by command, but compulsion. No horns had been blown. No messengers had gone out. Yet hut doors creaked open, bare feet pressed soil, and villagers emerged one by one, drawn toward the glowing trunk like moths to a flame that whispered. The sky was thick with silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves that had not moved in months. Elders stood first, forming a ring around the tree. Women followed, holding their children close. Even Bakery, voiceless and trembling, clung to his mother's waist, eyes wide and unsure. Jangle arrived last, flanked by his guards. He walked stiffly, eyes sunken, face pale, as though the shadows of his dreams had not let him sleep for weeks. His presence brought no authority now, only unease. He stood before the mbala tree as if preparing for war, but he carried no shield. Then it began. The tree groaned. It was a deep, cracking sound, like bone pulled from joint, and it rumbled through the earth. Birds screamed and scattered from the treetops. Infants began to wail, but their mothers could not soothe them. The ground shook, not violently, but steadily, as if something old and buried was rising through the roots. And then came the voice. One name was taken. One soul must return. The words rolled through the air, not loud but unstoppable, like thunder spoken through water. Every person dropped to their knees. The elders bowed their heads. Even the guards around Jangola flinched and backed away. The trunk of the tree began to ripple like water, and then she rose. From the base of the tree, where bark met soil, a figure emerged, not stepping, but rising, lifted as though drawn up by unseen hands. Bara. Nyama's mother. But not as they had last seen her, old and thin, broken by loss. This spirit was tall and ageless, her face glowing with earthlight, her eyes deep and burning like coals beneath river stones. Her voice came not from her mouth, but from the air around her. She stood above the crowd, her feet not touching the ground, and turned her face toward Jangola. You stripped the name of the daughter I bore. You let her name be carved away like rot. You told the tree she was dead while her blood still walked the earth. Now, before the ancestors and the people of Danwanu, speak. Jangola stared at her, face twitching. I did what was necessary, he said hoarsely. Her birth cursed the rains. Her tongue brought bad fortune. I had to protect the village. The spirit's gaze burned brighter. You lie. The earth trembled. The mbala tree split down its middle with a roar, not falling, but opening. From its center, dark red light poured out like a river of molten memory. Roots reached from the wound like fingers, thick and slow, curling toward the chief. The crowd gasped. One root shot forward and wrapped around Jangola's ankle. Another caught his thigh. He stumbled back, crying out, but the tree pulled, slow, relentless. His body was dragged forward, then up, lifted halfway into the glowing hollow trunk, legs kicking, arms flailing. Screams filled the air, not just his, but those of the ancestors, echoing from the tree itself. Shrieks of judgment, centuries old, filled the sky like storm winds trapped in bark. Mbara's spirit rose higher. You carved out her name for your ambition. Speak the truth before you are taken. Jangola's face twisted, not in pain, but in panic. His eyes darted to the villagers. To Bakery, sobbing in his mother's arms. To the guards, who now stepped away, abandoning their spears in the dirt. The tree pulled him further in, to his chest now. Stop, he cried. I did it. I disowned her. The tree slowed. I disowned Naima, he shouted, because I wanted to marry Chief Banuka's daughter. A union with her meant power. Crops. War alliances. I needed her gone. The light dimmed. The roots paused. His voice trembled now, softer, raw. I told the people she was cursed. But she wasn't. I am the curse. I buried her name to feed my name. He choked on his own breath. The mbala tree groaned once more, and the roots released him. Jangola crumpled to the ground, heaving, face buried in dirt. He did not rise. The villagers said nothing. They only stared, not at the fallen chief, but at the tree, and the spirit of Mbara, who turned to face them all. She was never the curse, her voice whispered. It was the silence you allowed. The lie you repeated. The price of ambition is truth, carved from bone, if it must be. With that, the spirit faded. Mbara's form dissolved into dust, drifting up into the air, caught in the slow spiral of wind that encircled the mbala tree. The split trunk sealed behind her. The red light faded. In the stillness that followed, an elder stood and spoke. Today, the tree judged not a girl, but a man. And so a new saying began in Danwanu. When a name is buried, the tree will speak. Jangola never ruled again. He lived, but the villagers no longer looked him in the eye. The throne remained empty. No man dared sit where ambition had burned. And the mbala tree, though scarred, stood brighter than before, its bark no longer bleeding, but warm with quiet fire. That night, the lullaby returned to the wind, and somewhere, a red-robed girl stood in the shadows, not seeking revenge anymore. Only remembering. And letting the land remember with her. The morning after the judgment, the sky opened wide, and for the first time in many seasons, the air carried the scent of rain, not the storming kind, but a soft promise, like soil waking from a long sleep. Villagers stood around the mbala tree in silence. No drums, no chants, only the hush of reverence. The trunk no longer pulsed red, but a low amber glow shimmered beneath its bark, as if the heart within it had changed its rhythm. Naima stepped forward. Her red robes trailed behind her, dust-streaked, but still vibrant, like blood that had survived. She walked slowly, not with triumph, but with stillness. Her bare feet pressed the soil as if greeting an old friend. Children parted. Elders bowed their heads. She reached out, and laid her palm on the trunk. The bark felt warm beneath her skin. From where her hand touched it, a light spread, thin at first, like a single line of fire tracing old carvings. But then it deepened, curling and twisting into ancient symbols. Letters re-emerged from the bark in glowing red strokes, strokes that spelled her name. Naima. Not cursed. Not erased. Not forgotten. Her true name returned. A breath passed through the crowd like wind. Some gasped, some wept. One by one, others stepped forward to kneel, not in worship, but in apology. Among them was Bakery. He walked shakily toward the tree, his eyes locked on Naima's. When he reached her, he fell to his knees and placed both hands flat on the roots. He did not speak, he could not. But he tilted his head, exposing his neck and shoulders, then touched his own name carved into the lower trunk and bowed. With trembling fingers, he gestured toward it, then toward Naima's name, higher on the tree now, glowing brighter. He placed his hand on her foot and pressed his forehead to the soil. Tears streamed down his face. Naima knelt. She did not speak either. She simply reached forward and touched Bakery's hand. The tree responded. A pulse of green, deep and lush, rippled through its bark. Leaves, dry and colorless for years, began to unfurl in rich emerald tones. Vines crept upward and flowers blinked open. A soft wind whispered through the branches, and birds returned, tiny, hesitant at first, then filling the canopy with song. For the first time since her exile, the mbala tree breathed. And so did the land. Later that season, Naima left the village again, not in anger, not in flight. She walked to the edge of the eastern river, where forgotten mothers once sang lullabies to sleeping babies and old women threw petals in memory of lost daughters. There, she built a shrine. It wasn't made of stone or ivory, but woven wood and reeds, with a roof of soft thatch and walls lined with hanging strips of cloth. Each cloth bore a name, names whispered to her by the wind, by the dreams of grandmothers, by children who no longer remembered who their ancestors were. It became the shrine of remembering. People came from distant places, bringing names to hang. Some cried as they tied the cloths. Some laughed, telling stories they feared would be lost. Some came just to sit, to be held in the silence of remembrance. Naima lived near the shrine, never taking a title, never seeking praise. But her name spread. They called her the daughter who returned without hatred. Some said her touch could call water from rock. Others believed if she stood by a grave, the earth would give back what truth was buried there. But Naima only smiled when asked about such things. She said, "I do not undo pain. I plant what grows after." And so, Danwanu changed. Not all at once. Not without resistance. But slowly, under new leaves and softened hearts. Children now learn not only the names of kings, but of those who were lost unjustly. Girls were not silenced. Names were not taken lightly. The mbala tree stood taller, its roots stronger. And when the wind passed through it, people swore they could hear not screams or groans, but a lullaby. A soft song about a girl who was thrown away. But who returned, not to curse the soil, but to teach it to bloom again. The years passed quietly. Naima lived not in glory but in gentle silence by the river, tending her shrine and remembering those no one else would. Children visited her to hear stories. Women came to ask which herbs healed grief. Men, even elders, knelt before her when they did not know how to say "I was wrong." And then one day, she was gone. No one saw her body. No one found her clothes or staff. Only a single strip of red cloth hung on the door of the shrine, fluttering softly, though there was no wind. They buried nothing, for there was nothing to bury. Yet the mbala tree mourned. Its bark darkened again, but not in rot. Rather, a deep, burnished hue like aged mahogany stretched around her name. The other names on the tree, honored elders, warriors, and chieftains, began to fade with the years. But not hers. Naima. Her name stayed as bright as the day it reappeared, carved in luminous red, aglow at dawn and dusk, pulsing like a heartbeat in the night. The villagers waited for it to dim. It never did. And then came the thorns. They sprouted subtly at first, thin, like needles beneath her name. But with each passing season, they thickened and coiled, curving protectively, almost reverently, around her carving. No bird dared nest there. No child dared touch it. No other name was carved anywhere near it again. The elders declared it sacred ground. But the village remembered not just because of the tree. Strange things began to happen. A chieftain from a distant region, arrogant and cruel, once mocked the tale. As he passed beneath the tree, it groaned. Then it whispered, not Naima's name, but that of the daughter he had cast out for marrying a hunter. He staggered and fell, his face pale with terror. "How does the tree know?" he gasped. The priest simply said, "Because the roots do." Soon, whispers returned, old ones, reshaped by memory. "You may forget your blood, but the roots will not." It became a saying passed from grandmother to granddaughter, from widow to grieving father. It rang louder than the drums at naming ceremonies, carved deeper into hearts than into wood. Children told stories by firelight. If you lie about a child, the mbala tree will grow teeth. If you leave your daughter behind, she may return, but not as yours. At night, if you hear your name whispered by wind, walk toward the river. She might be watching. They no longer said Naima's full name. That became forbidden, too sacred, too close to summoning. They called her the one who is remembered. And indeed, she was. Every year, on the day she vanished, red strips of cloth were tied to the tree. Not by order, not by tradition, but by instinct. Even strangers came, hanging the names of lost daughters, of silenced sisters. Some believed their spirits would be protected under her glow. Others believed that just saying their names beneath Naima's name gave them peace. The village changed again. Fathers began asking forgiveness aloud, not waiting until deathbed shame. Chiefs remembered their children's birthdays. Women who had once been called barren now sat at the shrine, honored as namekeepers, preserving lost names in song and story. But there were still moments, chilling, powerful, when the legend lived beyond the tale. One night, years after Naima's departure, Bakari, now a full man, a father himself, heard something outside his home. Footsteps. Bare. He opened the door. Nothing. Only a trail of glowing red footprints in the dust, walking not toward him, but past the house, toward the mbala tree. The soil smoked gently where she walked. And at the base of the tree, 2 handprints glowed, as if someone had leaned there. The bark wept sap the color of fire. Bakari dropped to his knees and wept. "Still watching," he whispered. "Still guarding." Others began to speak of similar sightings. A girl in red robes walking beneath the stars, never looking back. A pair of glowing hands cradling the head of a sobbing mother near the river. The sound of a lullaby in a house where a child had been scorned. But no one feared her. Because Naima had never returned with vengeance. She had returned with truth, and truth never sleeps. One final tale remains. An elder, blind with age and close to death, was carried to the mbala tree. She asked to be left alone with it. When the villagers returned at sunrise, she was gone. But the tree had a new carving, not a name, but a symbol. A red cloth, fluttering. And beneath it, in ancient script. Those remembered are never gone. So if you walk through Danwanu today, you may find the tree. You may see the shrine. You may meet girls who wear red not for beauty, but for courage. But if you ever stand before that glowing name and hear the wind say your own, ask yourself, who did you forget? And pray the roots have not.